Okay, this is my last time trying with this lapel mic, and if it doesn't work, then I don't know. Okay, so let me tell you a story. It was late January of 2021, and on my YouTube recommended page, a video pops up. It was clearly a booktube video, booktube being the like community of YouTube that makes videos about books. I've never read booktube before, but the algorithm was so good and so specific that I had to click on it because this individual in the video is literally exactly what she's a redhead with bangs and really cool winged eyeliner and tattoos. And I was like, wow, I want to be her. And so I watched the first video and I was just like, oh my God. First of all, this person is so effervescent and delightful to watch. And then second, I was like, damn, why don't I read fiction? And here we are. Okay. Basically, all growing up, this may not be significant to you, but I'm an Enneagram 4. So my whole life, understanding references has been like a real point of pride for me. If I can know where something comes from or like a pop culture reference, doesn't matter how far back, I feel very smart and very cool if I know what is being referenced. And I have the egomaniacal compulsion to be able to understand reference no matter what room I'm in or who I talk to. This stems from my childhood necessity to know just enough about everything to be able to have a conversation with anyone and therefore be friends with anyone. Out of that, I wanted to know basically like if there was a cover, I wanted to know who originally sang it. If there was a quote or a pop culture reference in a song or in a movie, I wanted to know what it was referring to. You're right. I did want everybody to think I was smart. And spoiler alert, it's a great way to get people to think you're smart because I've had people be very impressed by my knowledge of 1960s pop culture who are, my parents' age or older, and they're like, oh, you're too young to know that. I love that feeling. And yes, you're right. That is pride. And the reason I say all this is because since I was a teenager, the only books I wanted to read were by old dead guys, okay? I wanted to read the classics because I was like that kid growing up that was like, now don't get me wrong, I totally read Twilight and I was like really, really into it and I loved it. But like after Twilight and on, I was like, I'm cool. Like I read the classics. Like I read J.D. Salinger, which he is great and I do love him. However, I would just like not let myself read fun things. I just read classics that were often quite dry and confusing. And therefore, there are two hawks mating on top of my telephone pole. Okay. So basically what I'm saying is, because I didn't want to be like other girls, I only read boring books, and then in doing so, told myself, I just don't like fiction. I can't get into it. Because I was reading like freaking Victor Hugo, and just like, I don't know, I was just trying to find the like driest, most like obscure things that like, as a teenager, I was like not even like in the right headspace to appreciate. Whatever. So then college comes along, and I'm like filled with questions theologically, spiritually. God knows there's no one I felt safe talking about those things to. So I started reading memoirs. And the first book that comes to mind that really like catapulted my personal reading again for enjoyment was Sarah Bessey's Jesus Feminist. So I read that, and first of all, it saved my faith. I started reading like nonfiction more, like kind of memoirs or commentaries or stuff like that. And that brought us to January of 2021. When I tell you now how disgusting it is, how shameful it is, and how regretful I am that I went through 2020 without reading any fiction, I'm truly like I'm so embarrassed for myself that I could have been escaping in my own mind into beautiful worlds for a full year, and instead I decided to read sad ass memoirs. It's fine. It's in the past and there's nothing we can do about it. But basically what I'm saying is, all it took was one video of a cool girl talking about fiction, unashamedly, talking about romance, unashamedly, where I was like, bitch, I want to read books. And so I have been. Those are the books I've read so far this year. Those are some of my books I want to read that I already own. And here's the deal. Am I a booktube channel? No. I'm going to start making more videos about books. First of all, because I love watching them. And you may think to yourself, you like watching videos about books? I do. I like it a lot. It's very relaxing and it makes me want to read. And reading for me feels good for my brain, feels good for my soul, and feels productive to me. Like, it feels better to read for me than to watch like a movie or even to watch TV. Because at this point, I'm just watching the same 5 TV shows over and over again. All I do on this channel anyway is just like make fun videos for you guys. But now I'm gonna start throwing in some of my books that I'm reading because it's like really fun. And I'm like a reading girl now. I'm like a book girl now. So I've started tracking the books I'm reading with Goodreads, which is like an app that all the booktubers have. I thought I would just share some of my favorite books from 2020 that I remember reading. If you're not into it, that's okay, but it's really fun for me. Okay, so my favorite books of 2020. My first book is the only fiction book I think that I read all the way through in 2020, and that was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is like one of those really famous books. It's pretty short. I got this at Prospero's Books on 39th Street in Kansas City. It lives up to the hype. The whole format is letters that 2 sisters write back and forth to each other, and they are Black women in the South. I want to say it's like early 1900s. It is heartbreaking and it's so beautiful. And so there are themes of sisterhood, womanhood. There is like some abuse in the content. So if that's like harder for you to read, but this was like so good. I'm so glad I read it because it is one of those books that is very influential. And so I'm glad that I finally read this because I think it's really, really great. I would totally recommend it. And it's gorgeous. It's really beautiful. So I think I gave this a 5 out of 5. Okay, next we have The Very Worst Missionary by Jamie Wright, a memoir or whatever. Jamie and her husband and her 3 sons moved to Costa Rica to be Christian evangelical missionaries. It kind of just talks about how the experience was not what they thought it would be and how it revealed some stuff. She's super funny, crass. She's like, I feel like she's like a kindred, funny. If you grew up in the church that has a missions complex or industry, it certainly gives you a lot to think about in the terms of how we do missions and why. So it was really good, really fun, enjoyable, and also gives you a lot to think about. Next, we have Miracles and Other Reasonable Things by Sarah Bessey. I mentioned her earlier that her book, Jesus Feminist, was really formative to me. I have read every book by Sarah Bessey. I love her, and she grew up in a similar faith background to me, in a Christian, charismatic Pentecostal background, and has gone through deconstruction and survived and made it on the other side. So she really is a mentor to me from afar. Obviously, I've never met her. The title is Miracles and Other Reasonable Things, a story of unlearning and relearning God. Books like this, I'm like really into. I'm really, really into. But it basically follows Sarah as she has a horrific car accident and walks away with pretty like intense injuries and chronic pain. So her body has been like hurt and wounded from this accident that like doesn't get better and like can't get better. Kind of goes through her journey of dismantling this expectation she had in the church growing up of praying for healing, and if you pray for it, it'll happen, and disappointment and grief of losing the body that she had. And then along the way, she gets invited to the Vatican to meet the Pope. I remember tearing up a couple times in this. There is an instance where she's talking to her son about God, and her son says something really powerful, and it made me cry. So this was great, and I would really recommend this. Okay, next is Traveling Mercies by Anne Lamott. My friend Bailey gave me this used edition that she kind of told me to pass along, but I didn't want to because I really like it. And Okay, so Anne Lamott is one of those people where it's like everybody I love in terms of like authors and voices in the public space, everybody I love loves Anne Lamott. This is a collection of essays basically about faith. Anne Lamott is a Christian and she loves Jesus, not in the conventional way that I was taught you can or should, but her faith is very compelling to me. I want to be just like her, and her writing is so beautiful and so funny, and I'm obsessed, and I gave this 5 out of 5. I know that this is a book I'm going to turn to read again and again. The title essay, Traveling Mercies, yeah, she's so good. She's so good and I love her. Okay, this next one, it's by Richard Rohr. It's called Breathing Underwater, Spirituality and the 12 Steps. I myself do not have a substance use disorder. However, the 12 steps, man, are so powerful and I learned so much from them. And the person to blame for that is Dax Shepard, because I listened to his podcast and he is a recovering alcoholic and addict, and he's so open about his journey and the ways that he is able to grow and learn because he's an addict and needs the 12 steps. It's just so cool. And you know those books that you read and you're reading them and you're like, this is stuff that I have intuitively thought, but didn't take the time to like have concrete connections to be made. That's this book for me. I grew up in a faith tradition that really just leaned on spirituality to resolve issues of addiction, and felt that the 12 step were not specific enough in what they meant by higher power to be helpful. But what Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan monk, does is he makes the connection between the 12 steps and basically the life of Jesus and the scriptures and the ancient wisdom. It's very practical. I would recommend taking your time and reflecting, but it's basically a chapter for every step. It's really powerful. Again, this is something I know that I will consult time and again, especially as I pursue a career in the helping profession.
Hi, it's Editing Grace here. I kind of realized that I wasn't super clear on how accessible this book is. You don't have to have an addiction, a substance use disorder to get something out of this book, because what it's saying is like, oh, we all have things that we are like slaves to, like be it control or work or sex or food or alcohol or whatever. Like we all have things that we need to like get free from, and like we're all in recovery from living, basically, like from humanity. And so that's why this is a book that anybody could like get something from. You don't have to just like be an addict.
And I loved that. Another book that was so beautiful and also whose like social media presence I want to highlight is Kate Bowler. So I read Everything Happens for a Reason by Kate Bowler. So Kate is a professor at Duke of church history. She was diagnosed with cancer, and it wasn't a good kind of cancer to get. It kind of tells the tale of like what she studies, which is like mega churches, the Pentecostal movement, and the prosperity gospel. Like she is like a historian of like that whole world. As she was studying mega churches and the prosperity gospel and learning more about that, she herself got cancer, and so was not able to reconcile like name it and claim it. If you believe it, it'll happen. Everything happens for a reason. God didn't give this to you if you couldn't handle it kind of thing, with the fact that like, well, guess what? I have a husband and a child, and they are not going to have a wife or a mother. So how do we? It just addresses illness, suffering, grief with honesty instead of trying to gloss over it just so everybody else can feel better, which I really believe in and I think is like super powerful. She has a podcast called Everything Happens that is like so beautiful, and her work has just like so influenced the way that I view suffering. I can't wait to read her other books about prosperity gospel and the church. I think are going to be really illuminating for me. So check out Kate Bowler because she's just the best. Another last book of the year that I read in 2020 that I really loved was Honest Advent by Scott Erickson. Let me tell you, I love Christmas. I'm a Christmas bitch, okay? I love Christmas and I love honesty. And so I saw this and I was like, this looks amazing. So each day has a scripture and then a really cool visual thing to contemplate. And then it has some writing after it. It was like so great each day to have one of these during the Advent season, which is always a really special and significant season for me, and I loved this book. So if you're looking for an Advent book next year, I've gotta recommend it. It was excellent. So those are some of the books I read in 2020, and I loved them. But now that I've started reading fiction, I cannot stop, and I'm just really excited to read a ton. I would love to hear one of your favorite books that you read in 2020. And if you follow any booktubers, let me know. I will link Noelle down below and some of the other booktubers that I like a lot. And I'll see you next time.